In a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
Heidi-ho, everybody. It's episode 20 of The Last Angry DJ. My name is Mitch Hill, Mitchell K.C. Hill. That's relating to my old radio name. And why am I jumping there? It's kind of weird. But anyhow, we're glad to have you here. It's a very busy news day. And here's something I'm going to promise you. We're not going to talk politics on today's show. We might skitter around it just a little bit. But Alex and I are going to be talking about things that affect radio. One of those things that affected radio, affected a lot of people, is this damn thing, the crowd strike that came up and tapped a lot of people unexpectedly on the shoulder and affected them. This affected radio and affects media and a lot of other things, including if you were traveling, your airline reservations were probably at risk also. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about. If you'd like to reach out to us, my good cohort and friend Alex Knight has information for you.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me just welcome everybody to the show. This is The Last Angry DJ, the show where we normally talk to luminaries in the broadcast world. I consider Mitch Hill one of those people, and we normally have a guest on the show. But once again, second week in a row, it's just the two of us today. We are definitely going to be talking a little bit about this crowd strike issue because I truly feel that information technology is the underpinning of everything that we do. We couldn't do this show without information technology and the entire infrastructure of our show, which I will include the internet in that as well. And I feel it's something that we don't really tend to appreciate all that much. We take it for granted, just very much like how you can easily turn on the tap and you have running water and hit the light switch and you've got electricity in your home. We all take these things for granted. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the crowd strike, which you've probably heard enough about, but we want to make sure you understand the significance of it, is it affected a lot of different things because we really, really, really depend on our computer systems to do things that are, things that affect your everyday life. For example, John Preto from Office Hours sent me a note, and he was showing a picture, I guess it was Fremont Street, walking down the middle of Las Vegas. And a lot of the signs were out, and they had this blue screen of death because the signage depends upon that software running correctly. And if you had CrowdStrike involved, then you also had this blue screen of death showing up. And if you're at the airport looking at your airline reservations and plans, again, this might have shown up and affected your flight, might have been canceled. You would have been inconvenienced in some way. And you're probably scratching your head saying, why? How did that happen? And why is it affecting my life so much? Well, guess what? It affects us in the radio business also because I would say just about every radio broadcaster that's on the air today has a computer that's driving the program, which means that there's a computer system that's scheduling the commercials, all the jingles or play out sound bites that are there. It depends upon a Microsoft or what's the other software. I'm sorry. It's this is part of getting older. The L word. What's the other software that everybody uses for free? I just completely drew a blank on it.
I'm blanking on it.
Okay, I've got it back here. I'll jump up all of a sudden. I guess I need to step down as the next candidate because I can't remember everything. But anyhow, a lot of your radio depends upon the software to be running without a problem. And a lot of radio broadcasters use that CrowdStrike update to keep their systems going. And boom, it's off the air. So if I compare that to the way it used to be when I first got into radio, and I won't belay this because I know people start saying, please don't talk about how it was. Just tell us the way it is. Back in the old day, anything could happen. The internet could have gone out. Maybe even the power could have gone out. We still could have cranked up the generator and played records and talked and done our radio thing. But today, your radio programming is being delivered via a computer. There might be a live broadcaster there. interacting with it, but it's definitely an IT thing. So I'm going to turn the tables here a second to Alexander, who has a background in IT, to explain why computers are the way they are and why we depend on them so much, especially in broadcasting. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an information or an IT expert, but I've definitely worked in that industry, in the software industry, for a long time, since I was a kid. And I wasn't actually a Mac. I'm primarily a Mac user, and I still have some Windows PC. So
By the way, Linux. I could not spit the word
God,
Linux out. Sorry.
Of course.
There we go.
Yeah, our friend Linux. This is going to be the year of Linux on the desktop. That's an old joke for you. Yeah, so I still maintain a few Windows PCs here, so I have to be aware of patching and security problems for sure. And it's not to say that Mac OS and Linux OS are invulnerable to attacks. They're just less attacked, or I should say Mac OS, which is the other big popular consumer-friendly desktop operating system, is not as ubiquitous in the IT world. It's not used in enterprise a whole lot. And so the attack vector is going to be much larger on Windows PCs. And so that's what we're seeing. I mean, we've seen that for decades. I mean, Microsoft is always playing catch up. And this particular issue obviously is affecting Windows, people that are using that but it is a CrowdStrike problem. It is specific to the combination of those two things, people that use the CrowdStrike application and Windows. And as far as I know, it is not affecting Mac OS or Linux operating systems running this right now. And it's one of those things where they were talking about just deleting one file can fix this. But when your computer gets into a state where it's crashing and it's blue screening and you can't even get it to boot, how are you supposed to fix it? This is the nightmare. This is the predicament that IT people are having to deal with.
Especially in a live environment where you're doing reservations at an airline terminal or on the radio playing out music, and all of a sudden it doesn't want to work. Where did we go wrong to allow this kind of stuff to happen? And I think one of the things that as I remember, is that Windows used to offer service packs, and the service packs would update the computer operating system to the latest version of it. And it was something that you would apply at your leisure, Service Pack 1 or Service Pack 2. Now it's all automatic. Everything is constantly updating your computer in the background, doing all its little gadgetry stuff. I think that's dangerous. I think we got ourselves into a situation where we're at risk because the computer now, the manufacturers of the software want you to let them decide when they're going to update, let them decide what gets updated. Haven't you ever noticed on Windows, you really started hating wizards? That wizard started really irritating the heck out of me because I had all these shortcuts down and I could do things in the shell that were very simple and easy to do. Then all of a sudden you got to go through these very mundane and draconian systems.
To speak to the update frequency, things have changed. Microsoft no longer does these service packs. So what they do is they do these. Now, service packs used to be a huge, massive update where it wasn't just a roll-up of all security patches, but oftentimes introducing new features and major changes to the operating system. So they still do these, but in a different way. They don't call them service packs anymore. As far as major security patches, if you ever listen to Steve Gibson, and I would encourage, if you're interested in security, to subscribe to the Security Now podcast on the Twit network, because he covers this stuff in great depth and much more than we will be going into today. But there's the second Tuesday of the month where Microsoft does these massive security patches. And Mitch, you were talking about how Windows just updates things automatically. So in the IT world, most people do not use the version of Windows that you and I use that just update on them automatically. So even Windows Pro, you can delay, but you cannot put off major updates forever. The only way to do that is to use Windows Enterprise Edition, which a lot of companies use, because that gives the IT department full control over when patches get rolled out. So they can, in theory, they can test these security patches, because yes, security patches can fix one thing, they can also break stuff. So they can test this stuff before they push it out to people.
Why do you think CrowdStrike allowed this to happen? I mean, anybody that's in the business of software updates that they're pushing out live, to their constituency would have tested it somewhere. There'd be an alpha test and a beta test, and they would solicit problems. They never saw the problem coming. Come on, somebody's going to lose their job over this.
That's the question, isn't it? So they're going to be, I'm sure they are scrambling now to reevaluate their testing purposes. I have no inside knowledge, but I've worked in software companies for, I've worked at software companies for about 15 years or so. So I've been in that development cycle as a product manager and also on the support end of things. And so I've seen how the sausage is made, and everybody's approach to QA, to qualifying these updates is different. Some people use automated testing and scripting, and some don't, and they just purely rely on a combination of internal staff to beat on this stuff, to try to find problems and that you bring that stuff to the surface. They also rely on external beta testers, a small group of beta testers that they invite to test this stuff, provide feedback to the company so they can fix any problems that they find. So I don't have any inside knowledge, but I'm sure they're going to be doing things internally to improve. If they don't have internal test or automated testing, I'm sure they'll be doing stuff like that. What I find hilarious, though, is that when I took a look at their website, and I discovered that they've got this whole marketing spiel about how they have now artificial intelligence in their software. I'm like, really? I guess that AI is not really doing a great job for you, is it? It's not really finding those problems and fixing them magically on the back end, right?
Well, AI is only as good as the people that program it. And the other thing about AI, since we're on the subject of it, is that AI is very smart in that it can collaborate, mix up stuff and find it out on the internet, but it's only as good as the information that it has to back itself up. So if we have, as a people, have been putting information into the internet that is incorrect, the AI is just going to spit it back at us when we ask a related question. So the AI isn't smart. It's not creative, but it's a good way of being able to collaborate and get that information out. So if we've left the door open somewhere so the cows can get out of the barn, so to speak, the AI is going to do the same thing because that's the way we programmed it. And it's an issue.
Absolutely. And, Nielsen, not that anyone cares about, or there's probably a whole new generation. We were talking about this, Mitch and I, before the show, that there's a whole generation of people that probably don't even know what the Nielsen ratings are. If you're 19 or 20 years old, you probably don't know what that is. But even they were affected by this because they're running CrowdStrike on their systems. Although I just read a report that they just recovered from it. So they recovered fairly quickly, but there's lots of companies out there struggling to get their systems back up and running. And we're going to be talking about this for weeks. This is going to be a problem for the next couple of weeks. We'll continue to hear reports about this, but it's bad. This is really bad, and I don't know how they're going to recover from this as a company, because this is not a good look. I'm not saying companies are infallible. It's really what can really make or break a company is communication. How do you communicate with people? How transparent are you with your customers about data breaches and security problems? And can you explain very clearly what you're going to be doing to prevent these kind of problems from happening in the future? So time will tell if their stock is going to, I don't know if they're a public company or not, to be honest with you, but we'll see. Are they still going to be in business a year from now? I don't know. We'll have to watch.
Yeah, they have egg on their face.
Yeah.
And however they recover will determine whether or not people trust them moving forward. Because trust is something you have to earn. You don't just make it and manufacture it and put it out there. So it's interesting. The other part about this whole IT, kerfuffle, as we like to say, is that broadcast engineers, the people that run radio stations, their job has changed drastically over the way it used to be and the way it is today. It used to be we'd have a chief engineer, maybe a couple of other engineers on board just to keep things running. Nowadays, the chief engineer might have to be responsible for a whole bunch of radio stations in a particular market.
Absolutely.
And not just being making sure that the transmitter would transmit, but they're also IT experts. And how good an IT expert are they? It remains to be seen. Are they primarily IT? Are they primarily RF? Are they analog audio people? and you're expecting a lot from your chief engineer to be top of the line IT, because guess what? They'd make a whole lot more money if they took a job in an IT business sector than running a radio station, for what it's worth.
I'm so glad.
It's a pretty tough thing.
I'm so glad you brought it back to this industry too, because you're right, and we've talked about this in the past. About how a lot of people now are expected to do a lot more than that one. It's not like you only are a DJ now, or you're only a broadcast engineer. Like you said, you really have to expand your knowledge base, and you have to know it's not enough to just fix a microphone or fix some kind of audio problem or fix the transmitter. You're right. You have to know how computers work. You have to know how network stacks operate. You have to know a little bit about security. That's not an easy job, right? For a lot of independent radio stations, and they don't have the budgets to have these massive IT teams that they can, because they don't have the money for it, right? And now, of course, you can outsource things to other companies, but the problem with that is that then that third-party company doesn't have intimate knowledge about how things operate internally. There's potentially more risk hiring third-party companies to get, have them have access to your network and stuff like that. But a lot of people outsource stuff. But you're right. You have to know a lot about a lot of different things now, and that's not easy. And you're not always compensated for that. I mean, a lot of broadcast engineers are paid well, but a lot of people feel that it's unfair that they have to know so much. For they weren't necessarily hired to do that. I mean, how many times, Mitch, have you ever been hired to do something, and you have this title, and then all of a sudden 6 months in, you find yourself doing all these different jobs? Like, well, that's not what they're paying me for, right?
Well, job descriptions change, and that's also why they do an evaluation on a regular basis, so you both can come to an agreement as to what it is that is expected of you. Strangely, when I got back into radio in the 90s, I recognized a whole different bunch of jobs that got stacked in there, like you were saying about can't just be this. But as a morning disc jockey at a radio station, I started now being responsible for social media. So I was the guy, and I was like, social media? What do I know about that? So I better learn about it. This is like 92. We're talking CompUSA, AOL days. And I had to learn about that. And yeah, exactly. And I had to do video and things like, well, luckily I know these things, but that wasn't part of the deal when I first came on board. And I started feeling for the engineers now, too, because they had to become IT experts to run all this automation to be able to make sure that it wasn't going to be able to get hit by that little nasty that comes along. The other thing that's interesting that relates to what we're talking about here is that a lot of radio stations now are automated and run by a computer so that they pay less for talent. In other words, there may or may not be somebody in the actual studio that's running that computer. It may be pre-programmed by a head programmer in corporate headquarters in Chicago or LA or New York or whatever, so that things are under normal conditions, weather forecast and news updates are okay. But when there's a very heavy news drop on an automated radio station like today, stuff that's going on, I want to get into details about it, but some pretty heavy-duty things are happening politically. And earlier, the shooting that happened, there were a lot of radio stations that didn't broadcast it because they had no idea it happened, because their automation system wasn't prepared to be able to respond to those kind of impending disasters or problems and things like that. That's a bigger problem for smaller market radio stations because they don't commit the people to the news department to be able to keep on top. I mean, in the old days, they had an API machine in the back room, and it would go ding, 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 like that with an alert, and you'd run in. They'd rip the story off. They'd run in. I'd interrupt the broadcast, and Ani would come saying there's a giant asteroid getting ready to hit Wyoming, or whatever the problem was. That it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between the way things were done then and the way things are done now. And I guess the question comes up, is technology necessarily a good thing? And in this particular instance, this is not a good thing when it brings the whole world to its knees, whether it's in broadcasting or your reservation for your airline or walking down Times Square and looking up and seeing, I think David Brady, who works over at Paramount, one of our friends, said he was looking out the window at the McDonald's sign that's right outside his window, and it was a blue screen of death with some gibberish on there. The players are broken down. So you got to wonder, is the world okay? It's just people cutting corners to let things run on their own. And it's like, I'm not sure AI is going to do a better job of it, folks.
Yeah, no, it's not anytime soon. This reminds me, this whole thing of, people putting all their eggs in one basket, this ubiquitous product and service that these guys offer really reminds me a couple years ago, Rogers, which is one of the biggest, one of the major internet service providers, both for cell phone and internet. Now, I learned something new. So the Rogers network went down, and suddenly I found myself, I went to go get gas one morning on my way to work. I really needed gas. I couldn't pay. My card wouldn't work. And I found out that the Rogers network had gone down, and Rogers is the backbone of all these different payment processors. So across Canada, everything went down. Nobody could use credit card processing at all. Everyone had to go back to manually, writing down credit card information on a piece of paper and stuff like this. And it was horrible.
You were right and truly Rogered by Rogers.
We were screwed. I mean, the whole day, our business was affected. Now, thankfully, the company I work for, we're okay, financially. But just imagine how many small little mom and pop retail stores, losing money because they can't process transactions. And you know what happened, Mitch? It was a patch that somebody applied to some server, and that patch went wrong, and it just fucked over everything, took everything down across the entire country. And Rogers, issued a mea culpa, and they're like, oh, I guess we better reevaluate how we do things now. It's like, yeah, you think? But, we rely on this stuff.
We do, and we take it for granted that it's not going to be a problem. That's why I'm scared for AI, because it's just going to make these decisions faster. And when it makes a mistake, I think that they'll be pretty big, and the consequences may be even bigger. So get used to the idea that some things out there are going to have control over the information you get, so you can make decisions about whether you want to get in your car and leave your home, or if you want to take a flight somewhere. Beware. And your best advocate for it is not to depend on an app or something like that. Use your own brain to make a decision if you see things are going on. It's like today is a very intense news day. I'm going to keep a low profile because I don't want to talk about it, and B, I don't want to go out and get any more exposure because who knows what else is connected or maybe disconnected. It's just I'm a little bit paranoid. Maybe it's my age coming through or whatever. But I just don't trust all this technology to the maximum degree because it isn't necessarily better. And I'm going to make the risk of changing the subject here just a little bit. Let's talk about what I used to play. I used to play vinyl records, which sounded great. And then somewhere along the line, we went from vinyl records to CDs. And then from CDs to digital files, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, don't forget cassette tapes, too. We went cassette tapes.
I don't think we use cassettes much on the radio. I mean, they're convenient for us personally.
Sure.
But on the radio, it was pretty much records, CDs, and then digital files, and then MP3 files, too, which were horrible. But all of these things have consequences, and there's a lot of people. You're in the business of selling good sound, and I think you're a proponent of vinyl playback.
Sure.
Why does vinyl better than digital files? I mean, there's a reason for it, right?
Well, that's the argument. I mean, for me, here's the thing. The interesting thing about vinyl, if you just compare it to, say, CD, vinyl has a much smaller dynamic range. So just by the technology limitations alone, if you look at that, there's no way vinyl should actually sound better to anybody's ears. And yet, a lot of hi-fi enthusiasts prefer the sound of vinyl. I'm not talking about the pops and cracks and crackles and all that sort of stuff, because actually I don't really get a lot of that in my setup. If you maintain and clean your records properly and you clean your needle properly, you don't get a whole lot of that. But there's a certain that, first of all, it's the tactile experience. I love being able to see the liner notes. I love reading the credits on the album, and I just love the whole physical process. It forces me to focus on the music, putting the record on, dropping the needle, turning the lights on, just sitting in darkness, paying attention, not looking at my cell phone, not doing the dishes while I'm listening to music. I'm listening to music. It is a singular focus, and I love that, and I love the warmth of vinyl. I mean, and I've compared vinyl records, and I'll put on the same song on streaming, and it doesn't sound as good. Now, things have gotten better over the years as streaming services have tried to offer higher streaming bit rates. You know, Apple Music now offers lossless streaming, and if you've got a good DAC, yada, 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 it sounds better, but I still prefer vinyl. So for me, and I'm not saying it's a solution for everyone, because you only run out, you do run out of space. Like, there's only so much furniture I have in this small apartment for the physicality of physical media, and I'm a physical media collector. I for movies even that I care about, I still collect. I prefer Blu-ray. If you care about audio and video quality, there is no question a Blu-ray movie is going to look better than any streaming service. Why? Because you have zero control as the user, zero over how that content is delivered to you. And on top of that, you don't know for sure if the stream that you're getting from Netflix, Amazon, Disney, you don't know if that's the exact intent that the director had, because they can really screw it up. And all streaming services are vastly different in quality. Some are better than others. So that's how I feel about physical media.
Yeah, let me unpack that a little bit and track it back. You can be sure that the streaming services, especially if it's like Comcast or Xfinity, their job is to provide as many different choices in a limited amount of bandwidth that they offer. I don't know if it's a gigabyte or whatever that they're able to offer you, but they have to compress each little channel that they put on there to a certain degree in order to be able to fit all those choices. So they're emphasizing choice over quality, because they could get better quality, but they'd have to have less channels involved there, so that you give up with compression, which is a big deal. And the curse of people like ourselves that deal with a lot of compression issues is that we can teach ourselves to see block failures and things that show up as around motion picture, or if you're looking at a stadium and they're panning the crowd, there's way too much information there to fit into that. There's things that start happening that you see if you know what you're looking for. Exact same thing is true with analog versus digital. If you teach yourself to listen for digital distortion and things like that, you're going to hear it. The average person may not even notice it because they're not attuned to it. And the thing with vinyl is that vinyl doesn't necessarily sound better. In your opinion, it might sound better, but technically it may not be better because it's a different format, a different way of transferring those grooves and those jumps and eddies inside of a record into something that you can listen to. And it has its own little side effects and little isms that it adds to the sound. So I would say that vinyl has very natural musical special effects that it adds. Even recording tape, analog recording tape, does a little bit of compression with those little iron oxide particles that it's moving around in order to be able to save. So I'm just saying that there are things that sound different. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. The worse, it may be up to you to decide that. But the difference between them is affected. Digital on paper and on specs, if you got it, and you break it down and it might look better. There's more dynamic range, better bit depth, and this and that and the other thing. But it may not sound right. It may be too brittle to you in the high end.
Well, that's the thing. It's those imperfections often in the technology are what is pleasing to our ear. So to speak to analogs specifically, for example, in the recording world, why does a microphone plugged through a vintage Neve console sound so good? Well, it's because when the signal goes through these input and output transformers, that they impart what's called even order harmonics. Now you have odd harmonics and even order. Even order harmonics, to put it simply, is distortion, but it is a very pleasing distortion.
Musical.
It's
musical,
quote unquote, to use that term, musical, and it is very pleasing to the ear. So those are, you could argue, imperfections, but those are good imperfections that we've we enjoy, and that's why music has been recorded for decades on this analog gear and continues to be recorded on this analog gear, because there's something in there that we like. And being super clean and digital has its advantages, but there's also, you lose something. Why do people now record inside of Pro Tools and add distortion and add harmonics and add all this? They're adding this stuff with software because it lacks life, right?
I'm laughing because I do a lot of special effects work in After Effects for video, and all these plugins that you can add to do special effects and things like that. A lot of the special effects are things that we didn't want when we shot film, like lens flares. That's not something you want, but apparently lens flares are in. So you're actually adding back a mistake or a problem that's a lens flare, right, or grunging the video up to make it look like a vintage tape machine.
Yeah.
It's funny how all these things work. Hey, I'm with you 100%. Analog mic processors that are digitally controlled is probably the best we can do today's technology.
100%.
I've got a super expensive Neve 8801 behind me that processes my U87 microphone. It's all digital. It does all the things you say. It's got transformers on it. And
not that I'm jealous or anything.
Don't be jealous.
It
was weird because I rely on. I go to Sweetwater like so many other people, and I told the guys at Sweetwater, I said, I'm getting tired of my old Symmetrics. I want to put the very best audio processing I can on my microphone. And they were like, ooh, because they're probably seeing the price tag. And the best one that I could get them to give me was the Neve, which Rupert Neve designed originally, that has all kinds of stuff that has all the things that you said, that's analog goodness in it that makes it sound great.
Mitch, when you said that to the salesperson, did they get on the walkie-talkie and they're like, Bob, we got one.
Oh yeah, the guys at Sweetwater were all excited. And here's the crazy thing: it took them a week to come back to me because they didn't have an instant answer, because usually they'd say, oh, a DBX or a Mo2 or a digital this or that would be fine. I said, no, I want the best. I want the very, very friggin' best. And it was a strange thing. I'm sorry I did it because I wish I had the $4,000 today. But when I bought it, I had some money, and I said, hey, it's my instrument.
Don't look back. You can't regret it. Actually, as Shoji Productions in the chat was asking, how much, just questioning how much physical media that I actually buy. And I actually buy not as much vinyl anymore because I have limited space, and I actually had to buy a new piece of furniture recently to expand my collection. But I buy a lot of movies. I'm a movie buff, and I buy movies all the time. And I think in the last month I've bought at least 20 Blu-rays, and oftentimes I'm hunting for used stuff because I get deals when I go to these used stores. You can buy a Blu-ray for like $5-6 at some stores. So I end up coming home with this massive, I come home with this big box full of movies, and I love movies. I'm watching them all the time. So for me, it's important. And it's not just the quality, it's all the work that goes into special features. So I love that stuff. And you don't really necessarily get all of those special features, certainly not on streaming services. Apple's trying to do a better job of this. When you buy a movie on iTunes, a lot of movies now will have bonus features, but they don't necessarily have all the bonus features. And then you've got bespoke movie companies that care about preserving the art that is film. You've got Criterion, and you've got Arrow, and you've got all these other boutique companies. So if you care about movies, you should care about physical media. That's all.
Yeah, physical media. Robert, thanks for the question. Robert Shoji at Shoji Productions. Robert is the classic documentarist, so he knows how to ask questions. Interesting one about physical media, and I made the transition. I used to have everything because I could get it for free from the record company. So I had all the Beatles albums, all of this and all of that. I just had shelves and shelves of it all. And then CDs came along in the mid to late 80s, I guess is when Philips and Sony introduced it. So it was a sneaky thing for them to do because now people want to reinvest in their library and have all the Beatles stuff, but on CD. And in the beginning, it was horrible because the quality of CDs were horrible.
Right.
But along the line somewhere, they cleaned up the problem with the DACs on board the CDs, so they started sounding better. But anyhow, right now, here's what I got. I have a collection of CDs that cover everything that Billboard charted going back to the 60s. So I've got thousands of CDs, and they're compilation CDs that radio people use. Radio people will recognize when they say gold disc library. That's what I had. I have the gold disc library downstairs in my cabinet, and I go back to it once in a while. But a big project that I took on was transferring all of those CDs files, which they're PCM, linear PCM WAV files, to digital files, and not going to MP3, because the cost of storage is so cheap now. This is what a lot of radio stations are going through or have gone through. So now I have over here on my system, and you can see it bouncing the meters over my head, I have a library of the actual files that have been ripped from those CDs, bit perfect, as good a quality as you can possibly get. And as the playback systems change and update, I use a program called JRiver. If you're in a radio station, you are using an automation system like iMedia Touch or Audio Vault or Zella or whatever the system you may want to have, all those files become viable in those uses, and they're being played back at the very best quality you can have. The thing I found that was horribly hard, it took me 2 years to do it, was to take all of those individual files that I took off those thousands of CDs and get the metadata onto those digital files. And the metadata is, you've got the file that has the cart chunk data in there, and what's on that cart chunk is the artist and the title and the album and the year and the P-line information, which is who owns it, what record company, who's the publisher, the intro time, how long the song plays before the vocals start, the ending point where the automation system knows that somebody there that would be otherwise pushing a button. There's a ton of information that takes hours to be able to get and get it accurate and get it tight. So now I have that collection in my computer behind me that any radio station that wanted to do classic hits would love to have, because all those physical files. So I have the CDs as a backup, and I do have those. I don't have the records anymore. And now I've got all these digital files, which I can transfer and save and place wherever I want to, because they don't degrade with time and space. So thanks for your question, Roger. That's what I do.
And I just want to say that this, as much as I'm a proponent of physical media, I don't want to say that digital certainly hasn't afforded us a lot of advantages, and I still use a lot of digital technology. I do use streaming services all the time. So I just wanted to say that because it's not like it doesn't have its place. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Mitch, and we could prognosticate a little bit here, but as the radio industry continues to shrink with respect to layoffs and format changes and dying audiences and reduced revenue in advertising dollars and all that sort of stuff, do you think streaming audio, or I should say, do you think terrestrial radio stations that revolve around playing music, do you think we're going to still have that 10 years, 20 years from now? I know that's almost impossible to get. I like talking about this kind of stuff. It's kind of fun to predict, because I don't know if it can survive, because the streaming audio quality is so much better direct from those services like Apple Music. Why would I listen to an over-the-air broadcast? To me, as an audiophile, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So where do you see this?
It's a good question. We're really just talking about distribution here. When you get down to it, is that the RF signal that goes out over the airwaves, terrestrial broadcasting, it's just a way of getting some bit of information to as many different people out there. It's a one-to-many scenario. Same thing with streaming. You do the same thing. It's a little more efficient than broadcast, because broadcasting is stuck with certain regional areas and certain limitations. Like if we're talking about quality, we're talking about FM. The analog FM signal uses a bandwidth that's probably good from 15 to 18 kilohertz in terms of sound quality. But unfortunately, they're destroying that nowadays with so much compression to be loud on the dial that it's not comparably good to the original material that was on there. But it could be better, and they've tried. They have an HD1, HD2, and 3 and 4 on the analog signal that's a digital that allows them to rebroadcast a digital signal. But just because it's digital doesn't mean it's better. And the same thing I'll say this about streaming is just because it's digital doesn't mean it's a better quality unless somehow they've done something to make it better, make it improved. That, for example, if you listen to satellite radio to me just sounds a bit thin. It doesn't have the quality that I'm looking for, mainly because they're trying to jam in all those signals. So what you're giving up is basically a little bit of quality in order to get quantity of different choices. So if you like choices, they're doing the right thing. If you like quality, like the what is that? What's the DSD? That's that Apple is doing now.
Yeah, DSD is. DSD is not widely adopted, but definitely I know people that record in DSD, which is a pulse width modulation, not typical PCM.
It's a 1 bit. It's a 1 bit to 1 bit.
That's right.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of people argue that it is the closest to true analog sound that we will ever get or have on a digital system. But the problem is it's hard to edit because our editing systems like Pro Tools, Cubase, Ableton, these are all systems based around PCM audio. So they're incompatible. They have to be converted
24-bit, 48-bit,
they have to be
192
converted to be able to edit properly. So that's the problem. But Apple Music's gotten pretty good.
Here's one other thing just to point out over and above this. Not everybody has golden ears like you do, Alex. So there's a limited number of people out there that want that kind of quality that DSD brings, or they'll pay a premium to go with a streaming system that's high quality. Most people, unfortunately, are going for convenience. And when the MP3 file came out, everybody went, oh, good. Now I can stuff all of this music that I have in my library into my iPad or my iPhone that wouldn't fit there before. And because it's been compressed, it's got 4-to-1 or 8-to-1 compression. I get 8 songs where there used to be 1 linear PCM file. You're giving up quality for that compression. But for some people, that's okay. And that's the world we live in, too, as far as the quality of sound goes, is that people are thinking that's good enough. And that affects us in so many different ways. It affects us on the streaming quality, the visual quality on cable, on these plus services that are offered. That it's like they're trying to find the lowest common denominator to satisfy everybody. So all these advancements in technology don't necessarily mean it's going to be better. It just means that it's accomplishing something that affects the company's bottom line, or gives you more features, or things that don't necessarily contribute to the quality of the sound. I don't like that. I mean, radio is not going to sound that much better than it does today. But here's the thing to point out: radio has a digital signal, as I said, HD1, HD2, and so on. If they choose to stick that stuff in their signal somehow on a carrier that they have available for bandwidth, and the quality is kind of it's kind of bad as far as I'm concerned. They're not out there to provide you with the best sounding. They're out there to provide you with as much entertainment as you possibly can go. And because we live in this world of that's good enough, they're able to get away with doing a lot of those things. But I think it's a non-play thing. I think the HD thing is going to fall off as far as radio. I think what's going to happen is things like AM are going to convert themselves to in-band digital, and they're going to get rid of the analog portion because the analog right now sucks. On the AM side, you're way down in the band. There's so many devices that make so much noise. If you tune in on your AM radio today, it's very likely you're going to be hearing a thunderstorm nearby in the form of static and crashes, and you're going to hear fluorescent lights, switching power supplies, computers, microwave ovens. All these things conspire to make it sound horrible. So that's why one of the reasons why AM has sort of gotten out of favor is that you have all these things that are affecting its ability to provide a cleaner signal. And then they went to FM. And I was around when radio stations were competing with each other between the AM side and the FM side. And the big deal was, well, AM is, where to be. FM is just sort of like the cheap cousin. In fact, FM was so much of a cheap cousin that they couldn't sell and make money off of. They played music ad infinitum, and they played more music at a better quality, and they sold themselves accordingly. And then eventually they became popular, and when they became popular, they became more saleable, and FM became a thing. And now it competes with AM, or competed with AM, for its viability as a business model. Nobody would want to own an AM station these days as much as they'd rather have a FM station. And what's next? The internet. So I see exactly the same things that affected us in the AM days of FM tapping us on the shoulder. I think FM has got the same problem with the internet tapping them on the shoulder and saying bandwidth, streaming, that's the way to go, or satellite. Those are alternative ways of being able to deliver distribution of product and quality.
Yeah,
I hope I answered your question, Roger.
I think that radio's going through growing pains right now. So are podcasts as well. And it's impossible for us to say what is going to be around 20 years from now. That's too long to look forward to. It's interesting to discuss it, but I think that radio is going to have a really tough time to stay relevant for a whole new generation of people that are growing up right now, because I just don't think they really think about it as a viable platform. It's not really interesting to them, not just for music, but I mean even just getting news. People don't immediately go to radio. I'm not saying it doesn't serve a purpose or will continue to have value. I think it absolutely will. But I think specifically for music, I think it's going to have a lot of problems over the next few years. So I don't know what's going to happen.
You hit on a good subject, because it's part of the Last Angry DJ difference between me and you. I'm the boomer, you're the millennial, and we've got some Gen X's in there too. Hey, Chris, good to have you here. Here's the thing. It also depends on the methodology of the listeners. Like, people my age are more and more in the mix for radio listeners because we grew up with it. We're comfortable with it. We use it because it's always there and it's always convenient, push button or a dial change away. And I'm more likely to use a radio in my car or, sitting on the beach or, while I'm preparing a meal than you would. I'm less likely to go to a streaming media, but that's somebody in the between 50 and let's say 80 as an age group, a demographic that radio is still relevant for and continues to be relevant for. But that will shrink and eventually fall out of favor. But radio is not going to do anything marvelous and stupendous that's going to immediately explode and be, the new radio. This is the interesting thing. I think that all that stuff is going to come from innovation in the streaming media, and us older guys are going to disappear from the planet and will be less and less relevant. But today, I think radio is very relevant because it serves a group of people, particularly in my age group. So classic hits and classic rock and things like that still play well to us older folks that grew up with those on our little transistor radios. Yeah,
I mean, look, I don't want to get into panic mode too, because we just talked about physical media too for quite a while today, and if you just look at the numbers, physical media sales are shrinking year over year over year. Am I worried about it going away? Yes, I'm worried, but I think it's going to become a boutique thing because there are enough companies and there's enough interest to keep this thing alive. It's probably not going to be a multi-billion-dollar business in the future, and neither will radio. So I still think that it can be a thing, but it needs to be it needs to evolve. And look, all technology evolves, all business evolves. Some businesses die off, and new businesses come and go, and trends come and go. So look, I mean, radio's been around for quite a while. And it may not be around forever, and that's okay too. We just have to evolve and find ways to contribute. We all have skills.
I'll go along with you. I think evolving makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But I say things change. Technology changes. Your people you serve, they change. They may get older. They may just die off. I'm 70 years old, for Christ's sake, and I have some soft feelings for vinyl, no pun intended, and maybe for push-button radios and things like that. Maybe not down the road. Maybe when I'm in a nursing home, I'm going to be listening to streaming media on my streaming media player or my iPod from all my files that I've saved up over the time. But I think that radio needs to know that it needs to evolve, like you said. It's a great word to describe it. It needs to evolve with their listeners and not try to play off of their past glory, so to speak. It's like I get accused of that all the time, saying, "Oh, I was there in the golden age of radio, and why didn't they bring that back?" Well, they'd bring it back if it worked, but it doesn't. So if I were to go back on the radio, the people I'd be talking to are people my age or in that age group that makes more sense. It doesn't stop me from complaining about this happening and affecting my ability to do a radio show. Somebody asked on a question, one of our questions here is like, what do you do in the middle of nowhere when you get that blue screen of death? And I jump in my car, rat race to the radio station, and hopefully they've got a turntable or a CD player and a microphone, and I'd be able to jump in and do that. Or from my home. I mean, nowadays you can do a lot remote control-wise. I think Tom Birch was talking about it. He had one of his radio stations where he built the entire studio at the transmitter site, and everything they do is remote controlled from another location. So I wouldn't have to go in my car to get there to take over the radio program. But if my computer went down, that's a different story altogether. I think there's a bunch of old-line DJ slash engineers that always feel like, well, there may be an electromagnetic pulse from a passing nuclear weapon or asteroid, and I'm gonna take all those old turntables that are sitting in the back room and put it into a room, and someday somebody's going to thank me when I bring out all this old analog gear, and that's how we're going to be able to continue broadcasting. Yeah, it would be an interesting thing.
Yeah, it would, and after all this that we've said, I guess the one thing that I've been thinking about this a lot lately as we've been talking about this on various episodes, but as this industry evolves, I mean, I think this now's as good a time as any. Is that if you're in the world of broadcast, I mean, Mitch, for being in the industry for so long, that at a moment's notice, that radio station could change its format. You can be fired, and you're used to getting fired and finding other jobs, and now is as good a time as any to build up your skills and find out how you can be useful outside of that specific industry too. I mean, we could tie this conversation into artificial intelligence and the concerns about people losing their jobs. And yes, many mundane, rudimentary jobs are going to get lost to this, just as automation in the assembly line in the 60s, got rid of a lot of jobs. We find ways to become useful. We can talk about retraining and, how do we retrain people to do different types of high technology jobs. But you should always look for ways to be useful, to learn new skills. And because you can't rely on just only knowing one thing now. You have to know a little about a lot of things. And I think that's going to be a trend that we'll continue to discuss on this show, and it'll be interesting to see how things evolve. And I'm sure we'll have more guests on the show that will be able to speak to that too. And I would love to be able to get some people now that are just starting their careers in the broadcast industry, and I'll lump journalism in there too, to talk about this stuff and see like what's the landscape like now. Are you concerned about losing work to AI? From just mundane reporting on the news. I mean, it's going to be a problem.
Well, here's your safe bet. If you're looking to get a career in broadcasting, do exactly what Alexander was saying. Try to learn as much about everything: production, IT, engineering, DJing, media, streaming, all of those things. But to be honest with you, I think my advice today is to find a career in a skill. be a plumber, be a carpenter, be a fabricator, be a welder, be those things, because those are things aren't going away. You're not going to have an AI doing the carpentry. So there's a lot to be said for that. I think if you go to my friend Mike Rowe, he has a Micro Works. He's pushing the idea that you don't have to go to college to be able to get a degree in social studies or art sciences or whatever the case it is, and owe $200,000 to the government or to the school for that education. It'd be better to become an apprentice with a plumber or a mechanic, or at least have those things in your pocket as a skill so that you can always have a job. I regret the fact that all of a sudden the work that I've made my career out of, which is doing video production, special effects, things like that, are being replaced quickly by technology to the point where if I want to go out looking for that kind of work, the price value, the value proposition has drifted way down. So it's hard to make a living off that. And then I got to thinking, well, I could go back into radio again. And I'm getting a little pushback on thinking that I could get back on the air at the age of 70 because nobody wants to hire an older disc jockey. Even though I can nail it, I can do it really well. But unless you're doing a classic hit station or something like that, or classic rock, I'm not as relevant to that particular thing. If it's a CHR or pop stations dealing with all these new artists that I can't even pronounce them, the names completely floor me, I would be useless to that. And there's plenty of opportunities for other people to do that. But the world is changing, and it's always changing. It's changing a whole lot faster. We're going through a tech upgrade with computers and democratization, as you've said before, of the media, and we need to find new ways in order to be able to make a living doing those things. Alice, can you think of any questions that have been asked that are significant
I just wanted
chat related?
I just wanted to mention here, this is just a comment from Brett in the chat saying that, Mitch, you are a young 70 years old. So he's paying you a compliment there.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we had some great
yeah, you can
conversations
say it,
here.
but it doesn't instantly make me young. But there's a lot of things I can tell you. One of the worst things about being older is that not all parts of your body get up in the morning at the same time. Like I'll jump out of bed, like, hey, time to face another day, and my spleen will still be in bed, or some other important part of my body hasn't quite gotten up yet, so I got to sort of coax it out of the bed. So yeah, thanks. I try to do all these things. Anything else anybody wants to say?
There's one thing, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I have a friend of mine, a coworker, and I didn't have a good answer for him, Mitch, but 2 years ago, he had a stroke and he's recovering now, but he realizes now because there's some nerve damage and he can't feel anything in his left hand, and he's a musician, and so he's trying to go through physiotherapy and he's trying to relearn how to play the bass. And it's been 2 years, and the doctor is telling him, look, if the feeling hasn't come back by now, it may not ever. And that's really depressing. Also, he's coming to terms with the fact that he's not going to be able to do the very physical nature of the job that he was so good at doing. He can't come back. And we had a conversation on the phone, and he was telling me, no one's going to want to hire a guy that's, just turned 60 now that has to change careers because I can't do this job. He's telling me I'm going to have to, what am I going to do? Who's going to want to hire a guy in his 60s to do another job? And this is what we're talking about here, Mitch, going back to the whole ageism thing. And I didn't have a good answer for him. I guess I'm just asking you for advice. Like, what do you say to somebody like that who says, what am I supposed to do? Do I go back to school? How am I supposed to, I feel like I want to contribute, but I clearly can't do this physical job, but I could probably do another job. But then there's the problem, well, who's going to want to hire me? What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's a damn shame, and I'm sorry. My heart goes out to your friend that had that, because to have something taken from you, which is intrinsically part of your reason to live, is horrible. But it happens to people all the time. And a lot of those people are able to redirect their interest in other areas that either help other people with similar limitations, teach them how to change their life to be able to accommodate that limitation. far be it for me to make that suggestion, because I've never had that happen to me. But age has been creeping up on me. And one of the things that I've been trying, and thanks earlier the comment that somebody said I'm a young 70. I don't even think in terms of years. I just think in terms of ability. I still have the voice. I can still sound like I did 40, 50 years ago when I was on the radio. It gets a little tired sometimes. You can hear me doing, but I'm doing a podcast because it's something that challenges me mentally and otherwise to be a little bit more like sharing a little bit more of my frustrations about getting older, ageism, technology. I think you've gathered, if you've followed our show for 20 shows, that I cover a lot of bases. Maybe I need to learn some more things. And a lot of those more things coming from Alexander, because Alexander's a younger guy that's had exposure to new technology and ways to expand your universe. And between the two of us, maybe we can help anybody learn a little bit more. We're just dealing with the niche of broadcast and media and TV and radio and streaming.
I'm just here to help myself, and if we help each other, and by accident, if we end up helping other people, then that's fantastic. But I'm so glad you brought that up, Mitch, because the reason why I do this show too is to make myself a better communicator, to improve how I communicate with other people, and also to sharpen my technology skills and to learn new things too. This is why I do this show and why I do office hours, which people know me from too, because I learn from other people that are more experienced in the industry, and I get to learn new skills and figure out all these new side hustles that I can suddenly have, and figure out ways of, maybe some of them turn into a business and I'm able to make some money from, and maybe others I don't, but money isn't the most important thing. It's not the single driving factor for me. So there are a lot of things that I do because it just makes me a better human being. And that's why I'm here. And hopefully, and it sounds like that's why you're here too, Mitch.
Yeah, I'm here to get something out of it. It may not be money. I think I'm too smart to realize that we're going to be like Mr. Beast and Joe Rogan and have millions of dollars for doing this. But what we do have is people to follow us and ask really interesting questions. Thank you for all the folks that provide those questions, and they connect with us in some way by something that we may have said, and it's like, wow, that rings true. That's kind of how I feel about this or that. Or I totally disagree with what he just said, and I'm going to ask a question about it. That's fine. I think I can speak for Alex when I say this. If people are engaged with what we're talking about, the dialogue, the conversation, the consequences, things like this, that tap each of us on the shoulder every day in every way.
You like that blue
What's
screen,
that?
don't you? You like that blue screen.
I like it because I think it instantly says, everybody's used to seeing it. It says immediately, the tech strike thing, yeah. I like it because it instantly makes a point. And I'm a marketing guy after all. But anyhow, the point is, as long as people want to hear what we have to say or have commentary about it, Alex and I are going to do this. As long as we get that, yeah, it would be great if we could make money on this somewhere down the road. But right now, we're not interested in that. We're more interested in what you folks have to say. And speaking of that, Alex, how do people reach out and say what they want?
Yeah, there's various ways. You can go to our Discord server. And if you haven't joined our Discord server, it's a fun place to be. You'll see a QR code on the screen there. So if you scan that with the camera app on your phone, that will let you in there. And of course, you can email us at hello@thelastangrydj.com. And of course, on Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and all those fun platforms as well. We're working on getting more content on there in the future. And of course, thanks to everybody who joined us live on the show today. We stream the show every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And thanks to all your great comments today. We look forward to having you in the future.
Yeah, we'd love to hear who you think would be a great guest. I was talking to friends of mine today. I've got a list of people that I'll work on trying to get them lined up. Doing a live show makes it a little more complicated because whatever happens, and we do it at 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 Eastern, just to let you know. And it's an interesting beast. I like the live component because it takes me back to my old radio days. As I was telling Alex before we got started, I still get the tinglies when I know I'm live and what I say has consequences. So we're getting comments from somebody right now as we speak. So feel free to reach out. We appreciate that. We'll be back again next week for show number 21. We have a number of guests lined up that we'd like to have on. We're going to have to surprise you midweek and let you know who they are. But in the meantime, watch out for this and keep your eyes open. Watch out. Tech is not everything, but it could put you at risk to something. So I say be a little bit paranoid. It'll get you through your life a lot better. Take care. We'll see you next week.